Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of our socials. You can find us at KHTS Radio.
KHTS, your hometown station.
This is KHTS News Director live in studio with Kathy Hunter, Director of Student Services for the William S. Hart District. How are you doing, Kathy?
I'm doing great, Devon. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for joining us. So today we're going to be discussing a wide topic, discipline in the Hart District. So in our newsroom, we have covered stories on bullying and other issues, but for privacy reasons and other issues, the district can't really talk about the specifics. So today we're going to explain the district's perspective on how you guys address discipline.
I love that, and I love you giving us an opportunity to talk about it at a time when we're really not dealing with anything specific, so we can talk more about the philosophy and the actions that we take, along with the restrictions on the schools as far as decisions we make that are based on laws that are enacted. So I love the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And as a school district, your goal is to keep students in the school and educate them and keep them learning. So as far as expulsion and suspension, is that one of the last thing you guys consider for discipline? It's kind of like the absolute last step?
It isn't always the last step. It depends on the actual infraction.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have certain behaviors that still are considered zero tolerance, which is something you heard actually thrown around beginning around probably 1994, because there was obviously, that was the time of the school shooting at Columbine, and so there became a renewed interest nationwide about school safety, and so there became a zero tolerance policy. And I don't know, but it became a real problem, because if the zero tolerance policy, for example, is no knives, which makes total sense, but if you have a first grader who opens their lunchbox and there's a plastic butter knife in there because their mom sent it for them to spread some peanut butter on their apple, that child was immediately suspended or expelled from school as if he had a dangerous weapon. So the zero tolerance policy truly did not work. What they ended up finding out as they were doing studies is, one, it did not change children's behavior at all, and in fact it took a lot of kids who were really good kids on a good path behaviorally, and it actually threw them off of that path because now they identified themselves as being a problem. And then we looked at the number of students who were actually missing school and instruction because they were being pulled out of school and suspended. And as we know nowadays, when a child is suspended, they're usually just home alone without supervision. There isn't necessarily any discipline that comes along with that. And so it wasn't effective. So in 2012, they basically, at least in California, our legislative body decided that that's not working. And it also was throwing more minorities out of school than it was other populations. And so they took a look at it and came up with what they decided was going to be no more zero tolerance, except for extreme instances, having a gun, selling drugs, those type of things that are dangerous to everyone. But for everything else, it needed to be progressive discipline, so that we needed to start with what's called other means of correction, because our goal philosophically is to teach and to change behavior, not to punish. And so that really is how we approach all discipline at the standpoint, is from a teaching perspective, which makes total sense since we're educators.
Exactly. So can you kind of explain what is progressive discipline? So for example, if a student or a parent comes to you and saying that there's an issue with another student, how will the district kind of investigate that incident and discipline those students?
That is a great question, because it works a little different every time. So let me just take a typical thing that happens, okay? We have two junior high girls who have been friends, and now they are fighting over a boy, okay? And so they began to call each other some pretty horrible names and write back and forth on through text, through social media. And so parent obviously calls in, says, my child is being bullied by this other child. This is a very typical, common experience. Well, first of all, we look and try to help the parent understand what bullying is and what bullying is not. And district-wide, there's a policy, and it actually coordinates with what it is nationwide, that bullying is not a pure conflict. It doesn't mean two friends who've had a falling out. Even though those things can become harsh and mean and hurtful, it's not bullying. Bullying is a situation where someone purposely means to cause harm to another, one. Two, which this is the biggest, there has to be a power differential between the two people. So that means one child is very, very popular, let's say, and the other has hardly any friends, and that is a power differential. Two kids who have already been friends and have a falling out, there is no power differential. And then the third thing is that it usually has to repeat over a period of time. On occasion, an incident of bullying can be a one-time incident, but that's very rare because that usually is assault, battery, something else other than being considered bullying. So first we define that and help everyone understand. And then remember, our goal is now to repair the relationship. We have two girls who are handling a situation not in the best of ways. They are verbally attacking each other, let's say isolating one another. So the first thing we would want to do in that situation is bring them together and do some type of restorative justice. Help them talk through a situation with a trained adult who can help each one understand the other's perspective and hopefully heal that relationship. Now, the other thing that comes into play is, let's say when we go into the student records and look at both of those girls' backgrounds, we have one or the other who has a whole slew of issues with behavior, having done mean things to other kids, called names, all of this. So it's repetitive behavior. If we see that, then that child's going to get a higher level of discipline than the child who has never done anything. If we have a child who has a totally clean discipline record, that means they're going to start at the lowest level of progressive discipline, okay? But if they've already done a number of things, they've already been disciplined, and we're going to look at what's already taken place, and we're going to build on that and go to the next level. So the first thing would normally be, let's just conference with the kids, mediate, and try to resolve the situation. If that doesn't work, then we take another step, which might be a lunch detention, a brunch detention, where they're required to do some type of an assignment to learn about how to cope with different kinds of issues, losses, peer conflict, those type of things. If that doesn't work, it might be a Saturday school. If that doesn't work and we have to go to a higher level, we might put them on a contract, which tells them if you engage in any of these behaviors again, we're going to have to move you from this campus to a different campus because you are not working with us to make this work. If that doesn't work and it escalates to a higher level, then it may be just out of school suspension for anywhere from 1 to 5 days, or it also could mean a full-blown expulsion if the behavior is severe enough and meets the education code's requirements for actually expelling a student. And so there's a wide range with lots of creative things in between, so each principal or administrator is able to use their own judgment of how to actually resolve that problem. And if you don't mind my going on,
No,
there's
this
one
is all
other
great.
really important thing for people to know is that if we go in initially to do an investigation, we pull the kids' records, we have them write incident statements, we do all those things, but we also look to see if a child might be labeled as a child who has special needs. If they do, the whole process stops because children with special needs are protected by what's called IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and there are absolute legal requirements of how you handle things with a disabled student. So let's pretend that I'm working with a student who is autistic, and so they've hit another student. That's very different than having a student who is in general education who has hit another student, because now I have to, by law, have a meeting with a large group of people, including the parent and the child, along with other professionals, to determine, was that autistic child's behavior of hitting, was that part of his or her disability that he or she could not control, or was it outside of that? So we call that a manifestation. We try to find out if it's a manifestation of their disability, because if it is, we can't discipline them for that. They couldn't help it. So what we have to do is find other supports and services to put in place to help the child not repeat that type of behavior, because clearly we don't want them hurting any of our other students, but we have to look at how's the right way to do it and how to do it by what the law allows us to do. So it's a very important factor, because it happens frequently, that we might have a student who's special needs, and we can't reveal that to the other parents. That's private, confidential information.
So in the case where a student is on the spectrum or has other special needs, what support services does the district have for those students?
We have tons of services and support. So it could be, it depends on the situation, but there is speech and language support. They might get counseling ongoing every single week. They may go to certain kind of groups for learning how to cope with certain types of feelings. If it's somebody like that's on the spectrum, for example, it might be we buy them a weighted vest or some type of assistive technology to help them learn how to better calm themselves. They might have pet therapy where they bring an animal with them to school every day. The range is wide open when it comes to special needs. Basically, it's whatever it takes. We do whatever it takes to make that child be successful in school and be able to obviously learn and accomplish their goals for life. We want them to be as independent as they can when they leave us.
That's great. So we're here live in studio with Kathy Hunter, Director of Student Services for the Hart District. So we're discussing discipline in the district. So you might have mentioned that progressive discipline, and the first step is always mediation. So how often does the mediation, just talking through with the students, how often does that help?
I would say that helps at least 50% of the time. And it all depends on the adult who's conducting it, because a lot of it is finesse of the ability to really listen, let each child have an opportunity to speak and to actually listen to the other child and not just hear them or wait for their turn to speak. So part of it is timing of waiting until tempers and emotions have cooled and be able to bring them together and facilitate that conversation so that it's not, fake. I don't want to have a student who says, I'm sorry, and they don't mean it. That's meaningless. We really want to have that go into a deeper level. But if it's a pure conflict, okay, which is the thing we're speaking about, the mediation helps at least 50% of the time. Now, we frequently have situations where a parent will choose not to allow us to mediate with the child because they don't want their child in the room with the other child. And we respect their wishes on that, even though we may strongly believe that that's the best way to actually resolve the situation, because otherwise you get into things like trying to change kids' schedules so they don't see each other, trying to do a lot of avoidance type of things. And if the behavior doesn't rise to the level of one child not being at that school anymore, it's very difficult to have them not find a way to be able to get along. It's like you at work. I mean, everybody has people that may not be their favorite person to be around, but that's part of being a human being, is learning how to get along with people that really don't hit us well as far as personality clash or whatever it happens to be. So we want to teach kids those skills.
And you mentioned other means of correction, so it's a varying degree. So what are some other examples? You actually have a long list. Those on Facebook Live, we actually have a full list of other means of correction. So what are some of the more common ones?
I will kind of just go through a few of these. One that we use quite frequently is campus service hours, which is just like community service hours. So we might assign a certain number of hours for a child maybe to volunteer to work in the library, reshelf books. Maybe they might work in a class with special needs students, which helps them develop empathy and understanding for working with other people. We also can have an adult shadow sometimes if we have a student where we feel like we've done intervention, but we just need to make sure that everybody stays safe. So we'll have an adult shadow for a while. We bring in our school resource officers, so our deputies, to speak to kids often to let them know that when this happens, whatever the offense was as an adult, what would the consequences be, and help them have that conference one-on-one, which is actually very effective. In our district, we tend to use our deputies to really do intervention and build relationships with kids. They're not there to arrest kids and be punitive unless it's a serious crime has been committed and they're obviously doing their job. But otherwise, they're on the campuses to help kids understand that law enforcement's there to help them. They're there to help keep all of us safe. And so we love to use that. We might refer them to a threat assessment or a risk assessment team where the parents and the student come to the district office and they go through a process with Dr. Beatty, who is the head of our counseling department, and myself, and we do really structured type of interviews to try to determine what's going on with the child and the family that might be causing the problem. because in the end, that's what you want to do, is find out what's the real reason rather than just the symptomology that's coming up. As I said, we do the suspended discipline transfer contracts. Those are pretty common for our kids. Like, let's say I've had possession of marijuana on campus, and then I've already went through what we call TIDE, which is a wonderful program we do that's 2 days of intensive education about the dangers of drug use. The sheriffs help do part of the training for it. Action does part of the training, Action Family Counseling. In fact, they actually host it for us and run the program. Domestic violence will come over and speak, and they have those kids for 2 full days, and they educate them, then they go back to school. It doesn't count as a suspension. It actually is just an intervention. But once the child has went through that, and then if they repeat that behavior, then it might go to that next level up where they're put on a suspended discipline transfer contract saying, if you're caught doing this again, then unfortunately you can't stay at this particular school anymore. Those are a few of the ones. I mean, the
It's a
list
very
really
long list.
is exhaustive. A couple of things I've seen some of our creative APs do is, if they had 2 children who had a problem with each other, is give them a problem to solve together, and that they had to spend lunch together every single day till whatever the problem was, not the problem between the kids, an actual academic type of problem, was solved. And then by the end of it, they've actually become friends because they're working together on something rather than continuing to perpetuate what their differences are. And so it really is up to the administrator, but our goal is always to, one, provide an atmosphere on our campuses that prevents anything from happening in the first place, which is why we have things like Capturing Kids' Hearts. We have positive behavior intervention supports. We're starting our wellness centers. We have safe school ambassadors. We have text to tip where kids can text in if they're aware that there might be a fight or a drug deal going in. We try to put as much as we can into all of those different kinds of climate and culture building things on each campus, so we prevent problems in the first place. And as you know, our valley, we have very safe schools rated extremely high for academic performance, but also if you look at the amount of discipline that we have compared to any other high school district, it is minimal. I mean, we have good kids here, good families, and so a lot of it is our emphasis on putting those things in place so kids don't want to make poor choices.
And you mentioned the wellness centers. Is this part of like the new, or is in general like the holistic approach that the district has? Because it's not just academic. You know, these students, you know, from junior high and high school, there's a lot of things going on outside of school as well. So I think these new centers will help with that as well.
Absolutely. There's been an increase, as we've seen nationwide, in the amount of suicide attempts and suicidal ideation by young people, along with reports of anxiety and depression. There's a number of factors which would take a whole nother discussion to go into why that seems to be on the rise, but it is. And so academically, or even with athletics or performing arts, et cetera, kids can't perform and do well if they have all of these underlying factors going on in their life. If I'm spending my day feeling depressed and anxious and thinking about ending my life, I'm obviously not succeeding at the level I could be at school. And so we know we have to embrace the whole child and look at how do we support them. And so truthfully, it was the universities that first started bringing about wellness centers and safe spaces, you might have heard of them in both ways, for college students who were really beginning to have lots of coping problems. So our governing board was wise enough to see what was going on, be aware of the problem, and want to jump on it immediately. And so they're the ones who really worked with our cabinet and our superintendent to say, let's look at wellness centers. So we went and visited wellness centers, and we looked online at other ones, found some really good models, and decided that they were going to put resources, and Title IV funds is where we got some money from. That's basically categorical, can only be spent on certain things. Wellness happens to be one of the 4 things it can be spent on, and actually opened 2 wellness centers coming this fall. One will be at Canyon High School, one will be at West Ranch High School. We wanted to pick one on each side of our valley. They will be model programs that we hope to make turnkey, so that as we're able to collect data and see that they really are serving the needs of kids and helping kids with their different issues so that they can be successful and stay in school, then we hope to expand them out to our other schools. But all of our schools know that wellness is a priority, and so they are all doing different things at each campus that are towards wellness. Some have created just specific wellness rooms, but they're not full wellness centers that are, completely staffed and all of the things like the ones that Canyon and at West Ranch will be. But they all have that initiative as a major goal, because we all love kids, and we know that it's a whole child. It's not just a brain sitting there for math and reading and all those good things. It's a whole person, and we want to make sure we put our arms around and wrap around and do whatever we can to make sure that they all have a successful experience and leave us as functioning adults.
And you mentioned staffing. Who's going to be actually in these centers to help these kids?
At the two centers that we're actually providing the staffing for, Sarah Gilbert is our new wellness director, or no, coordinator of wellness for the district level, and she will be at Canyon High full-time in the wellness center. Nancy Phillips has been with my department for a while now as a social worker, and so she wanted to make the move over, so she will be at West Ranch full-time in the wellness center. And so they each will do that staffing. The rest of the social workers will continue to support all the other schools as far as individual case management for students, etc. But Nancy and Sarah will work together. They'll also develop a 3-year plan for how to expand. They'll be writing a comprehensive guide on how to start up a wellness center. They'll be collecting data, what works, what doesn't work, doing surveys, and making sure they continue through the year to modify what's being offered to support the needs of the kids. So right now there'll be yoga offered. They'll have brown bag lunches where we're going to bring speakers in on all kinds of wellness topics: nutrition, physical fitness, etc., mindfulness. There'll be activities in there that kids who just actually need to have a de-stress time can come in and take advantage of. We will run different groups based on each campus's needs, if they need a grief group, for example, etc. So it's going to actually have a lot of things going on. There may be art therapy. They also will be in charge of kind of helping destigmatize the idea of seeking help for mental health issues on campus. So they'll do some school-wide awareness type of activities to help the whole entire population embrace the idea of we're all here to help each other, and there's nothing embarrassing or shameful about going and seeking help.
Especially on the middle school level, because that's when a lot of these mental health issues come up, and I think that some of these kids don't even realize that they might have anxiety and that they might have depression, and just kind of on the below the surface, they might not even realize it.
Absolutely. So each of the junior highs are also doing different things. I went to Sierra Vista yesterday. They have a beautiful wellness room that they've just put together. They do have a counselor who will probably be in that room. It's not going to be a dedicated staff all the time. It won't have the same setup as the wellness centers, but as a wellness room, they've done a fabulous job getting that ready also for the fall semester. I went over to La Mesa Junior High and met with their principal, Michelle Krantz. They have what they're calling the Howl Hut, which is very cool, because through PBIS, Howl stands for all the things they want their students to exhibit as far as behaviors and responsibility and character. But the way it's designed, it has all kinds of fun things in there for the kids: air hockey, basketball, videos, but it'll only be open to kids during lunch and brunch, and only if they earn it. So it fits in with their positive behavior intervention support system. So if I earn, let's say, 30 tickets, then I can take one of my best friends during lunch and go and do all the fun things that are in the Howl Hut, whereas the other kids would not be able to access it. So we're really using that as a method to reinforce positive behavior among the campus, and every staff member, no matter what their job is, will be able to give out tickets to kids for good choices.
Wow, I wish I had that when I was in junior high.
Yeah, kind of cool. When I was in there, I didn't want to leave. It was very comfortable.
So that kind of, it's not just negative discipline, it's also a positive reinforcement that kind of ties into what you're discussing earlier, is the prevention for these behaviors.
Absolutely. I mean, all the research shows, punishment really doesn't work, even for, years when parents spank their kids. That it doesn't work on very many children. It does work on some, but usually that negative punishment has not ever showed to have an actual lasting effect on changing the internal of a child. They may choose to do a better job hiding their behavior from their parents so they don't get in trouble, but it doesn't actually change their character and the choices they make. Whereas if we do positive things, it really does shape real change in behavior, and not just basically acting one way around adults and another way when they're not being seen by adult eyes. So very important.
So just kind of holistically, just that holistic approach with the wellness centers and these wellness rooms, but also the early intervention. I think these programs and these different things that the district is doing will help these kids succeed throughout their life.
I actually think so. I mean, when I look at just personal examples of students that I've known that have struggled whenever they were in school, maybe they were being abused at home or had just some really, maybe a father had died, they had a lot of grief that was not dealt with, and they really struggled in school. And if we started intervening with them early with a lot of these different types of programs and all, I've seen them as adults and they are doing fantastic. They are moms, dads, they are career people, responsible adults, and they really are always thankful about the experience they had at the school, because really the biggest thing is to know there's somebody there who cares about you as a human being, not just as you're my student and I care about you because I need you to do what I want you to do and do your work and assignments and make good grades and learn and all that. But I mean, I honestly believe our staff as a whole cares about kids as human beings, as individuals, and that always makes a difference. I mean, that's who we are as a society, and actually as animals, we're pack animals. We need that social interaction, which truthfully is one of the reasons we're seeing some concerns, is because even though kids may think they're being more social because of all of their interactions electronically, they're actually being less social in the way that human beings actually need socialization, which is face to face. And so a lot of these programs are meant to actually remove electronics and to actually help kids start being face to face again and communicating and being comfortable with that.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. For more information on everything that Heart District is doing, visit their website, heartdistrict.org. That's heartdistrict.org. This has been Kathy Hunter, Director of Student Services for the district. Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, Devon. I appreciate you having me.